Are you hardcore? Is your name Henry? Then you'll certainly enjoy this anatomy of Hardcore Henry. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have Popcorn Talk's own executive producer, senior Stephen Lemieux.
Thank you, Phil, for
Senior citizen, Stephen
amazing
Lemieux.
intro. Hey guys, I'm Stephen Lemieux. I'm the EP of Popcorn Talk and content developer for the site and network. You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Lemieux, but I'm also behind the Popcorn Talk Twitter, so tweet it at the Popcorn Talk.
He literally hides behind it.
I hide behind it. It's a bulletproof shield.
That's right. And if you can tell from the opening intro, we're doing Hardcore Henry, the first-person perspective movie that people are raving about.
That luckily is not directed by UA Ball.
No, you know what? And it came out in 2015 in terms of the festival circuit, and now it's finally hit the big screen. And I gotta say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, I know some people kind of have. People have a reservation of why they should perhaps see it. Other people are seeing it for the curiosity. I recommend just see it.
Yeah, go see it. This is like a fun time. Like, you just go, like, experience it. You're just like, this is awesome. I feel like if they created an Oculus Rift or a VR version of this film with, like, the seat moving in 4D, nobody would ever say anything negative about it. It would just be so fun. It'd be amazing.
I agree. The storyline, you know, unlike most typical movies, it doesn't progress in the way of, like, you know, more stakes and more stakes. You just kind of find out information as you go along. And, you know, there's ultimately a boss that you have to fight. But it still progresses in an interesting way.
Yeah, they really teed it up in kind of a BioShock way. BioShock has characters that you're introduced to, you're sent on quests, and as you develop more information, you kind of discover more things and eventually find out a big twist until you have to fight that big twist, and then you're all done. But the way they really did this with having motivation as the central story device, I thought was really clever because they're not so on the nose with it. And I mean, we'll get into this more in kind of breaking down the story in the writing, but just going from the very first scene of the movie where he's a young kid and having his dad call him the pussy as the motivation. So that's kind of like trying to prove your parents wrong. And then going into it where the pussy is the motivation, and then fear is the motivation.
Very literal.
Very literal. And then finding out that it's actually just trying to gain the respect of your father as the last motivation once he has his memories back. I don't know. It was a cool journey through.
That's what you actually got out of it by the end.
No, I mean, when you really think about it, because when that was the problem. And that's what I thought was really interesting, that a lot of people think that there wasn't a story to this movie. But when you look at the scene that Jimmy had recorded, and he's playing the scene on the screen, and it's like, we need something that's more of an emotional motivation for these super soldiers. And Akan's like, the paycheck is their motivation, blah, 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 blah. And then we find out that the entirety of this movie was creating memories for all of the super soldiers to experience, so they actually have a background to go on through recording Henry's memories, and using his girlfriend, using her as the motivation for all these super soldiers. I mean, I don't know. I really liked every time they give you a little bit more information, it kind of gives you an epiphany to everything that they've played previously, and I thought it was written very well. I thought they kept the dialogue from Henry. Of course, there's none of it, but what you perceive and how the story progresses and what you're slowly given to create this full picture, by the end of it, I was really satisfied. I thought that it was well-paced. I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel like, oh my God, why? Like, I didn't feel like I needed to know why Akan had his powers. That was like the one thing that was like confusing to me, but I was just
we'll
like,
talk about that.
Yeah, I was just like, all right, I'm in all the way on that. Like, I enjoyed it.
Fair enough. I mean, you know, this was very much a passion project, and it spawned in the right ways. And I think, you know, although the people that we'll talk about, you know, are not necessarily household names by any means, certainly not in America, a lot of love went into it, and they are all qualified, right? By the way, to give you kind of number one, for those of you joining us first time, as you already might have gotten the hint at it, we talk about all spoilers, so we assume that you've seen the movie. If you haven't, stop right here, come back, we'll talk, and then rejoin us. If you're returning, welcome back. But so speaking of kind of where this movie all came from, right? The director Ellis, he's done music videos for his band in this style, and it garnered a lot of praise, right? So much so that Samuel L. Jackson, Darren Aronofsky, they were tweeting him. I mean, the fact that one can only dream of that type of hype.
Well, when I think it was like 2 years ago, I saw the Stampede video. I think it was that one. I'm not 100% sure.
There's Bad Motherfucker and the Stampede.
But I saw one of them, right?
And look up, the band is called Biting Elbows.
And I was watching this, and I was just so enthralled with it. It was like pretty intense because from a filmmaker's standpoint, you're watching this like, God, they edited this together. I can't even know how many takes it would have taken to fluid movement, get all these shots put together. And it was entertaining. It didn't have any story other than the music playing and the person going through the motions. So the fact that they took that from that and put it in this movie, that the main character does not have any lines, that was great. I thought you don't need a main character to have lines. You're putting the person in the position of the main character. Anyone who watches this movie is the main character of the movie. So going through the motions of that, and it's just so well done that this guy really deserved the ability to do this. I mean, there's a lot of even going back to like Deadpool earlier. Right now, there's a huge conversation of like, oh, rated R films, and do we need to give the ability to make rated R films for a good movie? It's like, no, you just need to do what they did in this case, what they did in Deadpool's case. Give the person making it the full creative ability to do whatever they want.
Well, sometimes that doesn't always work.
No,
out,
yeah, but
I mean, the interesting part is he did, and you can see why, have a lot of, at first, reservation about making this movie. I mean, a 3-minute music video
is different than a 90-minute film.
Yeah, because music video by its nature, like you look at it differently. You don't. There's obviously been great music videos that tell a story and illustrate this, but the primary vehicle is also just the music. Now in this, obviously, by the end of it, there's so much music, right? That's what kind of keeps it going. The only quiet times are when we get little bits of information. So it functions in that same way. But he also didn't want to just do it just to do it. But after, he had a Skype session. He got a Facebook message from Timur Bekmambetov, one of the producers. And, they had a whole Skype session. And
Bekmambetov. There we go.
There you go.
And Bekmambetov.
Bekmambetov? Yeah. All right. Sorry, Phil.
Why don't people in the comments section, why don't you type out phonetically how it's supposed to be?
There you go.
But either way, right? So they had a whole conversation about this and really talked about it, of how it could actually be done. And, Timur really convinced him of like, okay, it's just not just a novelty. Like, it would be pretty cool to do this movie, and you could do it right. And if you download our rundown in the description, there's a link provided there. You'll get the full quote about it. I don't, it's almost like a half a page, so I don't honestly verbatim read it, but that's the gist of it.
What I think is so cool about this, and like, you go back 30 years, this movie would not have been made because honestly, they never would have contacted the guy. Then
His Facebook,
like you look at this, it's like he Facebook messaged me, and then we Skyped, and then we decided we're gonna make a movie. Like, that's pretty awesome. It just goes to show that, like, filmmakers, like young filmmakers nowadays. I mean, I look back to OK Go, the band. They had the cinematographer, the guy's sister, created the whole music video with the treadmills, and from that booked so much work, started creating music videos for, like, it's just amazing to see that if you create content that's clever and you put in the effort and it looks great, you take notice nowadays from people who otherwise would never have seen any of your work. So, I mean, this movie is a precedent to be set for that. I just think it's really cool because it's great that he was hesitant, and I think that's a really strong position to have, because a lot of people would have just been like, a movie, yeah, let's do it, and then just not really thought about how difficult it would be.
Well, you're coming at it from this way, so he's obviously the writer, and some additional writing was provided by Will Stewart, but you look at it, okay, whatever reservations I might have, whatever the questions are that are preventing me from making this movie, let's try to answer them through the writing. And that's kind of the perception that you then go into it with, and you start to try to answer.
Yeah.
And I think, overall, they did that.
I think they did that overall. I think it could have done for another rewrite. There's only one part of the movie that threw me off, and I don't know if you agree with me on this. Again, there's spoilers in this review. At the club where all the girls are naked and everyone's sexy and all this is going on, and then the two girls, the composer, of course, is one of them. We'll get into that later. Come in and they're got the swords and everything's going on, and then suddenly they're leaving in the car chase. That was where the major disconnect was for me, because the story up until that point was like step by step, go here, go here, go here, and then that was just like they say something to Jimmy, and then Jimmy's like, all right, we got to do this first, and we're going this way, and I'm like, wait, what are we doing? Where are we going? What is, like, I don't understand where our destination is from here. So that was the only part of the movie where I was like, what is going on? I don't know if you had that problem as well.
I think at this point, no, I didn't necessarily have that. I mean, looking back on it, because everything was so structured for Henry, he didn't really make a decision until the very end on his own. He just kind of did what he was told to do. Almost out of necessity, he didn't really have a choice. And so, at that point, like, okay, what the difference between Jimmy or somebody else telling him where to go and what to do and where to be, it didn't make that much of a difference to me.
Okay.
And you're not, again, as I mentioned, right, you're not necessarily afforded that amount of time to think. They very specifically choose the moments when you're allowed to actually think about any sort of plot, because that's when it finally gets quiet. And it's quiet for, I didn't time it out, but I would venture to guess 30 seconds, and the rest of it is just music blaring and sound effects and just action. Well,
I was genuinely curious if you picked up something more from that scene, because there's there's the comedy of the women talking and the subtitles just going over each other and just a whole mess of stuff until Jimmy's like, okay! It's easier to agree than to just argue. I was wondering if there was something in that were like, we have to go to your lab or something, because that is the destination from that point, is we need to get to Jimmy's lab. But I just didn't gather that from the dialogue. I didn't understand what the ladies were pissed at him about and what they wanted from him. So I think the gist of it must have been, we need something from your lab. Not sure.
I mean, part of it was, right, I mean, the whole fact of the matter was Jimmy was living out through all these all the various sins that he could do. Now that he
pissed off a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're at a brothel, and so they're kind of like the pseudo, they're the owners of this, and it's almost like this isn't the first time he's done something to like mess up the brothel.
Yeah,
it seemed like. So, that kind of played into it. Again, is there a deeper meaning to it? Yeah, I'm sure. It took me a little bit to really think about that, because I wasn't prepared to think about that.
I just wish there were places like that in LA.
You don't think there's brothels in the world?
No, I said in LA.
You don't think there's brothels in LA?
I don't know.
All right.
So, sorry. Kind of took you off subject
No.
there.
All good. The interesting part, too, so, Ilya, he lived in London for a little bit, too, so he speaks both Russian and English fluently, even though so it kind of played nicely, because some of the dialogue, as you mentioned, in that scene in particular, was Russian. Other times it is English. So we get a nice mixture of the both. And I thought this was a fun kind of fact. The whole opening of Brothers Grimsby, have you seen that?
I've not seen it.
All right, I felt like you did. But is very much kind of in this style. And they actually did want Ilya to direct that portion of the scene, but he was too busy making this movie. So I found that interesting, because it totally matched pretty well. I could have sensed that they were both done by the same guy, but apparently not.
I'm glad that he did this movie instead.
Well, there you go. And Will Stewart, I couldn't get much more information about him in terms of the writing, but because he's primarily an actor that's taken on small roles, whether in Training Day, Lime Salted Love, and he's over at Harvard as a law professor. So again, not a lot of history on this in terms of this guy, but again, I feel like whoever entered this project just had passion for this piece to make it work, you know. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like a movie like this is not. It's not something that's going to be done by people who are looking for money. It's not something that's going to be done by people who are looking for the next major IP and the next major feature that everyone's just going to be all about. I think this has to be a passion project. I mean, and I think that's where the strongest stories come from. I think this could get a sequel. I think this could get different stories within the same world or with different characters of the same position. I think
next one will be called Hardcore Harry. I kept wanting to call it Hardcore Harry.
Oh, yeah, Harry was the name everyone kept calling it. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's strength in being put in a box. And with this movie, we talk about it. I think it's in the development side is that they didn't have a lot of, like, you look at these $300 million productions like Batman vs Superman and you look at what they can do with all the special effects and everything, and with a movie where you don't have that budget and you know the investors know it's not going to make that 50 million opening weekend, it's not going to make the 25 million opening weekend, you really have to think smart about how you're going to film this, how you're going to do it so you don't go way over budget, and how you're going to make it a good movie without needing that. And I think the way that he describes it in all the interviews that you've quoted and that I've watched with Ilya is that he wanted it to be something that people were proud of. And looking at it, you can see that this is something that has a personal touch. It's not just, oh, let's just churn these out. Let's just put out another Assassin's Creed this year.
I have to say, I mean, I thought the production value was very high, you know, and especially like the fact that that is first person. Yes, it had various cuts throughout each sequence, but at the end of the day, a lot of it. You know, the fact that he's everywhere you go, he's having to fight multiple people, and it has to be so well coordinated and orchestrated. Like this person goes here, then he falls. Like all that stuff, that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And the fact that they were all able to pull it off with the budget that they did, like this does to me, if I had to really guess, it looks like a $75 million movie, which I know it's not. It's not at all. I mean, it looks great. I think the biggest thing that they had going for them in this film as well is when you keep seeing these gigantic blockbuster hits, like you look at Mission Impossible and you look at Edge of Tomorrow, everything is so huge because you're from a third person's perspective. You're watching the actor, so if you want what the actor's doing to look cool, you need to have like far back and the actor's jumping off a building and you have to see how huge it is and see that the building is 300 miles tall or whatever you want it to be, or it has to be in space. You have to have the explosions. Just the flamethrowers, like, coming at you, like, that has as much impact as a nuke going off in another movie because it puts you in the seat. It puts you so much closer to it. It's so much larger in your eyes than if you're watching it from the third person. You don't need to be on a 100-story building for a first person to be doing parkour climbing to look down and feel that you're really high up in the air. You have a sense of danger. Everything is more realistic, and it kind of really helped the movie along because they're not having to rely on gimmicks to make you think that everything is high stakes. You're in the seat of this person. You're walking through the life of this person who is being attacked, who is being shot at, who's being put in situations that would kill a normal person. Yeah. And that's one of the funny things. So Ilya writes, hopefully none of us are going around picking up weapons and stabbing people. But if we were to do that, this is what it would look like.
Well, there's a video online that I recommend people watch if they're fans of video games. Somebody made a mod in Grand Theft Auto 5 that makes it first person.
Interesting.
It's really, really entertaining to watch, and it's really, really entertaining to play because it's just a whole new perspective. And if you enjoyed this movie, you would very much so enjoy doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I think the movie fires on all cylinders, to be honest.
Well, that's an interesting bit, right? So a lot of, there's a lot of great articles, I think Vox in particular, that kind of talks about the evolution of video games in the sense that, in all essence, right, this is Mario, right, where you got to go save the princess, and that really becomes it. Now there's the twist at the end where the princess is not really who she says she is, and that's the foundation of this story. But if you also look at video game culture, right, that very simple stories, and then they've evolved where, I mean, you talked about Batman versus Superman, the movie. All the Batman Arkham video games as of late have such a great storyline. Mark, who's engineering us, he likes video games, so like, and I know you like video games. The stories are it's very rich, and so it's interesting how like they almost like counterbalanced each other, and somewhere met in the middle to make this movie, but it works.
This movie was written like a BioShock game. I don't know if you've played any of those games, so I don't know, but
I haven't necessarily, but I know it's a very popular game.
It's story for story, very BioShock in that you don't have your memory. There's characters that you think are on your side that aren't on your side. There's quests that you're given with waypoints that you have to get to, and by the time you get to, something changes, so your plan has to change, and you have to go killing all these other guys and get to this. You have to protect somebody as they're going through waves of this is beat for beat a BioShock game, but there's something to be said for that because all the BioShock games are best-selling video games for every single episode. So I mean, if you like those, watch this. But the tropes of the damsel in distress, I thought it was a really interesting story arc to do because, I mean, imagine a Mario game where instead of the princess is in another castle, the princess is Bowser. Like, that's kind of the concept of this, and Bowser and the princess are working together instead of you saving the princess.
Absolutely. And, other things that's been compared, Assassin's Creed for, as you mentioned, the parkour elements.
Yeah.
So it combines both, where it's just it's shootout, but then there's also thinking, and then mission, and then jumping, and this and that. So all these elements, are pulled from these various, video games, but also with the story.
What would you think of like creating a series of just hardcore being the first person branding, and it's like hardcore Mission Impossible, and just refilm Mission Impossible in this style, or freaking hardcore Die Hard, and you're the first person of Bruce Willis the entire movie?
I think in order for that to work in any way, shape, or form, it would have to come from a place of love. It also have to be like remember in Be Kind, Rewind, where they sweeted all those movies.
Yeah,
I think it would have to be something like that, rather than some studio trying to get behind it.
Oh yeah, well of course.
Because then whether it was good or not, ultimately it could have a heart behind it, just like again the Be Kind, Rewind movies did with Jack Black and Mos Def.
That was not the best movie.
No, but I enjoyed the message of the movie and kind of the movies that they ultimately made. They would literally refilm movies.
No, yeah,
the classics. So for those of you who haven't seen it. All right, so we've talked kind of about the opening, right? So let's talk about the crux of the opening because, and there's a great picture that we have. He's kind of in the water, right? And Estelle lets him out, and this is where, much like in any sort of video game, this is your tutorial.
Yeah, like, oh, you use the joystick to look up. Now look left. Now look right. Cool. Now squeeze your fist.
Yeah.
Now break this apple.
Oops.
Applesauce.
So I really much enjoyed that, and by the way, like I also linked the picture because it shows kind of, again the photos that we'll kind of go through. We have a very limited amount of them, but nonetheless, it's just interesting to see from a third person perspective, the behind the scenes look at it, because obviously all we're given is the first person view of it. It
was super disorienting the way they did it with the reflection and everything. You're like, all right. You don't know where the camera is because you're just getting into the movie. And then when he gets out, you're like, oh, okay, got it. But no, they did a really good job having a camera on the reflection and a camera on the person
And it's
itself.
literally dead silent. Just like if you were on water and whatever else, like there was no sound whatsoever. No, I can't imagine, like room tone must have been very minimal. And something like that did play to the effect of watching the movie because, as you mentioned, we open up the movie with "You're a Pussy" bit, and then we cut to this pretty much right after, and it is very disorienting in that way. I mean, we have that whole credit sequence, and that's a lot of fun, but boom, just nothing.
Well, like I'd like to think that the scene of "You're a Pussy," like you've seen Inside Out, right? where you have like your core memories and you have your regular memories, but your core memories. Like I feel like that was just such a core memory for
Pussy Island. That was the memory.
Just his dad telling him that, like that scene of his life where the robot is destroyed or whatever, and the little toy robot is destroyed, is just such a inherent part of his being that the memory blocker just couldn't block the entire thing. And I think that's kind of like a cool thing to think about, that as much as this technology goes, it can't erase all aspects of who you were. And that's why they need this emotional motivation, because they're still human. As much as you make them robots, they're still human and need some human
element to it. And Jimmy was right. Jimmy was always right.
Yeah. Jimmy's the funniest character I've seen in movies in a long time.
No, how so?
It's just one of those things where every time it comes back, you're excited. It's like, oh my God, what's he going to be doing this time? Like I know Action Movie Anatomy on our network. They do a fist pump moment. My fist pump moment for this film would be when Jimmy's the galley sniper and he says, "Cover me for a moment." And then he takes up the sniper rifle, looks down, and suddenly the punk rock Jimmy is down there just slashing people and killing people and blows himself up down by the vans. I was like, that is just so awesome, because it's just switching between characters and just fucking shit up. Pardon my language. Like I thought it was great.
Yeah, and then, obviously we talked about kind of already how Jimmy served the purpose. There's a photo, if you will, Mark, the second one. So there's a fun picture of behind the scenes of the mission. And if you really dissect it, right? So there's Henry shooting at one of the guys in the white, and I just found this great because, again, it's just Jimmy's the one who gives him all these assignments and just provides him with everything. And he's also like the weapons checkpoint as well.
Kind of, yeah. He's just like,
and what do you need?
Oh, you're gonna be going. He's like Q.
In some sort of weird way, yeah.
He's the mobile Q. This picture's from the rooftop scene, which I wish we had like an outside picture of how they filmed this, because there's so many times where pieces of the building blows up while they're in the room, and there's all these people around it on every window and then coming through the roof, and he's shooting through the roof. Like, I would have loved to just be on set. Like, that's the way they filmed this movie is going to make me want to buy the DVD or Blu-ray just to see the behind
I
the
really
scenes.
hope they have a good behind-the-scenes feature as, because that would be fantastic. And sometimes I know movies of this budget sometimes aren't afforded that. Like, everything in Star Wars was definitely documented.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they just wanted to make a movie. So we'll see. But I think if they did capture at least, like, even if just 10% of production, that would be fantastic.
Well, just all the practical effects. Like,
and that was very important. Yeah, he didn't want, like, again, we kind of talked about this on other episodes, so if you're a huge fan, you've heard this debate before. If you're joining us, then it's perhaps new for you. But people are getting to the realization, just like Star Wars, of like, okay, practical effects look
better.
Real. Like, oh, what a concept, isn't that? Real things look real.
Jurassic Park versus Jurassic World.
Yeah. I
mean, it looks fake as hell, but it looks real because it looks fake now compared to everything. I mean, yeah, it's just this. And they said that they have 1,700 shots that they've had to put special effects on, but the majority of that was removing wires, removing lighting rigs and stuff like that. So as much as this film, like, there's some points in this movie where I'm like, that's obvious. The blood is obviously special effect. But for the majority of it, because it looks so realistic, you can kind of buy into it easier. Like, if this was...
But by the way, 1,700 shots is ultimately not that much. Lord of the Rings, the last one at that point, had like almost over 2,000 shots.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately not... it's on par, let's say.
Okay, I mean, we can say that. There's a certain charm to it when you're, especially if it's in the first person. Like, imagine like, you've been in 3D, you've seen
I've seen plenty of 3D.
Universal, you go to 3D, you put the glasses on, and things come forward, but they're so fake because it's just so fake. This, it's like you're in it, and everything kind of seems like it has an effect.
Yeah.
Like, he shoots a bullet, it's actually shooting something, not just oh, that's a fake bullet hole in the wall, or oh, that guy's just bleeding, but it's not really there. Let's talk about the intro of the movie itself, the opening credits.
Sure.
That was just, even though that was special effects, it was hard to watch because it was just so realistic and done. Yeah, like the whole.
It set you up. I mean, here's the thing. What it did nicely was that it prepared you for what was about to come, because it would do you a huge disservice if whatever, let's say you had flowers dancing around, and that might even actually be a funny juxtaposition to all of it. But you're like, oh, okay, this might not be so bad. And then to see like the first couple of kills, you're like, oh shoot, what am I in for?
It's I don't know. It took me back to like Saving Private Ryan with the knife scene, when the knife is just slowly going towards the neck, and you're like, no, they're not going to do it. They're not going to. Oh, this is so hard to watch. Oh God. No, yeah. I mean, I always feel like knives going into skin is always hard to watch in slow motion. This kind of felt like The Kingsman a little bit too. The sense of humor around it, and I'd love to see a scene shot in first person like this in the next Kingsman movie too.
I don't think they're gonna do that, but why not? What was your favorite scene?
You go first. Let me think of that.
I mean, it's a little bit tough to say for me. I think the rooftop scene for me, because that's finally when we get all the answers. And I really liked Estelle, you know, and because as I was watching it, you know, very early on, something didn't feel right. The fact that obviously Jimmy kind of keeps reappearing and this and that, and you're like, okay, fine. But the fact, Estelle, I thought it was so easy the way they dragged her through all of it. I was like, okay, something's not what it's seeming to be, which it obviously turns out that, oh, she's not his wife. She's the wife of Akan.
Yeah. I unfortunately kind of saw that twist coming a mile away. Like from the very first time I see her, I'm like, oh, she's a bad guy. I don't know if that's just intuition from video games or something, but I saw her and I was like, okay, this is a little bit too conspicuous. I see the ring. I'm assuming the ring is going to be some tracking device or something.
Well, that didn't turn out to be true.
Yeah, that didn't turn out to be true, but I don't know. I was kind of thrown off too because Chloe Dykstra is somebody who's hosted here before doing a few shows, and she's in LA and stuff, and I met her a bunch, but she looks so, the actress who plays Estella, Haley, right?
Haley Bennett.
Haley Bennett looks exactly like Chloe Dykstra, so it just kind of threw me off. I was like pulling out IMDb. I'm like, is that? No, that's not her. But it kind of threw me off. But no, I thought it was a very satisfying twist though, where you're just like, okay, you have a feeling that something's up. Okay, she's not really the mastermind behind it. It's still Akan. Okay, I can deal with that. And I like that it was her idea of, well, if they need emotional motivation, how about they all fall in love with me, your really sexy wife? Okay.
That wasn't narcissistic at all. What I also liked about, you know, they went that depth. I mean, of her saying, shoot, where was I going? The fact of the matter is, like, she knew when he pulled her into the escape pod that they had him.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was like, oh yeah, because even watching that scene, it was so well done of the whole hand of like, no, come on, and it did have that emotional weight of it of like, okay, I'm not leaving my wife behind.
Yeah, and just again, the way they used the hand motions too was great.
They had to. That was his only means of expression, besides his feet, which you just see him running.
Freaking the bus scene, Jimmy's like, you're gonna have to find this guy named Slick. What's
it's just Slick. Slick Dimitri.
Slick Dimitri, right? And then you're gonna take him, you're gonna kill him, and you're gonna rip his heart out, and you're gonna take that heart and you're gonna eat it. I'm just kidding, you're not gonna eat it. He's like, he's like fat. He's like, God damn it, just tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you're betraying me. I can't talk. And I love that he called him Chaplin. It's like, oh, I get messed up with freaking Chaplin here.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'd say my favorite part of the movie. I love the dance number. Like, I'm sorry, but that was just so out of the blue. And the whole movie is so fast paced, and you're like wondering when the bad thing's gonna happen. And they get through like 3 or 4 minutes straight of just this dance number of singing one line and then falling over, and then another character popping out and singing one line and falling over. I don't know. I mean, it was really, enjoyable. And then the sniper shot when the head gets blown off right in front of him, like that was pretty impactful too. Because of course you're in the first person, so he's grabbing his shirt and suddenly his head blows off, and you're like, "Fuck."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, also speaking about Jimmy, when Charlton was asked about what was one of the hardest scenes to film, he said it was the driving scene where you have to elbow a guy and, out of a moving vehicle, and it was tough. It was tough, and especially that was one of the scenes that he said they shot late in the production. So, when you're doing a movie like this, by the end, I gotta say, you're pretty tired.
I mean, that's what you sign up for, though. Honestly, like
you do, but I mean, making any movie is just number one mentally exhausting, and then when you're having the physicality to this level, it adds weight to it.
Yeah, I thought it's the first time I've seen a minigun well done in a movie, like when they're on the motorcycle, because it looks like the minigun's literally ripping the van in half with the bullets. This is the first time I've seen that well done. Jimmy's character just. When you first see him again after he's killed, because you don't know who the hell he is at this point, and then he's the homeless guy on the bus, that's when you kind of get the feeling that you're going to be seeing him a lot more throughout the movie. But they never disappointed, because anytime you got a new version of him, you were wondering if that was the real one, and you were kind of getting the feeling that, okay, they each have their own kind of specialty. The drugged out one was just like the berserk one. And then I thought it was really cool the higher path scene with the guy in the ski mask was actually Ilya, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that was a cool tidbit, how they added people in from the production at random points.
Well, I think there was almost that necessity of like, oh shoot, rather than get actors and this and that, why don't you just be in the movie? Okay.
Well, I mean, I was even thinking while I was watching, I was like, wow, they're doing this first person. I guarantee it's not the same actor doing every scene.
No, absolutely not. So yes, Henry was played by 10 different stuntmen, including Ilya, but yeah, 10 different people.
Yeah.
Although here's the thing, people are saying like we never get to see Henry. We saw his face in the reflection at the end, and I was trying to figure out, okay, whose face is that ultimately? But yeah, I found it strange how people are saying that we never get to see him ultimately.
The dialogue was weird with the last scene with Jimmy. And I think that threw a lot of people off because it's so interpret as you will, where he's like, I never realized what you are to me. And some people will interpret that as, oh, is it his son? Is it his brother? Like what? But of course he says like, you're my friend. Like a lot of people will not let go because once you kind of get that inkling that, oh, he's related to him, they don't understand that, no, he's saying that he's his friend and that's something he hasn't had in a long time. That's something that he doesn't realize. And I feel like that would be where a lot of the disconnect is. And when they show you, I was really wondering the whole movie if they were going to show us his face. If they were going to show, okay, who is Henry? What is this? I feel that their decision-making in only showing it at the end was great because that's when he gets his humanity back. Because up until that point, Henry is whatever Akan and Estelle want him to be. Because up until that point, he is play-by-play doing exactly what they want. Every time you see Akan, like let's say when he puts the platter through the dignitary's face, you know that Akan could have killed him at any time. So you're wondering throughout the movie, why hasn't he just killed him? You find out that he's recording all the memories to be put into all these other bots to give them the motivations. So, when you finally realize that it's because it's their plan all along, and then you see his face, you're like, okay, Henry is Henry for the first time in this entire movie. Jimmy has unblocked his memories. We realize that it wasn't a hatred of his father that pushed him as a human being before. It is his father's love of trying to teach him, like saying that his father said he was a pussy, and that's why he's never going to say it to him, but he needs to learn how to stand up for himself. So he's getting his own personality back. Henry is now Henry, going after Akan and going after Estelle. And I love the fact that he rips out his own eye to, like, cut off the guy's head. Like, I don't think you're ever going to find a movie again that does that.
Probably not. Well, speaking of Akan, so let's talk about this, right? A lot of people are left wondering, okay, what is, like, this telekinetic guy, what is he?
Why is he Magneto?
Well, there is an origin story. It's called Hardcore Aiken. It is a comic book that people were handed out at the film festival where it premiered. And, I don't know. I was trying to do some quick diligence of where you can find it. So I'm sure you can find it online or buy it. But it tells the whole origin story. And ultimately, he isn't evil, right? The whole story of the comic book is him from birth, the infamous Chernobyl
Explosion.
Disaster. So I think that's... It's a little bit cliche, but Chernobyl and
It's a comic book origin story.
Yeah, radiation and things like that lead ultimately to one superpower, and ultimately he gets into this field of robotics and becomes sinister.
It almost looked like somebody dipped Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor into bleach and like pulled him out.
Yeah, with the hair. Yeah,
but I thought it was really interesting how he didn't look at the camera a lot, like, because everyone that Henry interacts with in the movie looks directly into his eyes at the camera, but then in this case Aiken tries his best to avoid even looking into the eyes, and I'm wondering if that...
Well, it's because ultimately, as you said, the memories are being recorded, and so I don't know, you have to cut that out, I guess. You don't, to basically catch the creator in these memories, they don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So
True.
I think that's part of it. Haley Bennett, right? So we talked about her. She's actually a second degree friend, if you will, right? So Jerry Ferrara and his girlfriend Brianna, they're actually close friends with her. And had we had a little bit more time, we could have probably gotten Haley to be part of the show, and maybe in the future we still will. But I just thought that was an interesting connection, and she's been an Equalizer, Marley and Me, and I thought she did a fantastic job in this, and I hope to see more of her.
Equalizer is a great movie.
Indeed it is. And then Tim Roth, he made it into the movie. He is the father.
He is the father. He is the most scummy-looking guy all the time in those movies, but it's like great casting. Because like you can just imagine, like, if I was gonna cast that role, a dad calling his son a pussy, Tim Roth.
There you go.
Tim Roth.
All right, so one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about is compare this to various other things out there, right? So it's not other movies that, Doom's sort of done this, but it was a shorter sequence. As long as it may have been in that movie, it's certainly not an hour and a half type of movie. Then other examples are, you have Cloverfield, Chronicle, Blair Witch Project, Project X, but that's someone holding a camera and you're kind of aware of that fact of it. It's not literally the perspective of someone.
There's nothing to connect with when it's a camera. You're not, because it's you feel secondary. You feel like, in Cloverfield, let's say, or even Blair Witch, like you feel at any point they could just drop the camera on the ground and continue, and then you'll never get the rest of the story. You feel like they're just carrying you along out of inconvenience. Like, oh, we got to hold this camera, got to bring the audience along, otherwise we don't have a movie.
Well, that was, Blair Witch Project, that was a whole technique of itself. You know what I mean? Because it was supposed to be as real as possible. Like,
yeah,
so you can't necessarily do that. So, but it's interesting. Like, that was like the first of its kind, and the way they told that story, and the history of that, and the way it's evolved over the years. And it became kind of like the cliche of like, okay, we'll just shoot it, Cloverfield style. But now this is sort of almost the next evolution of it.
Yeah, I think as the first of its kind, it always kind of breaks that wall of, okay, now times after this will be a little bit easier. Because I'm sure Ilya will put out some kind of book in his lifetime that talks about this. I'm sure everyone who worked on this crew now has knowledge of how to do all these things, and they're going to be working on tons of movies. The film industry is a very small industry. As much as it's a large industry, the people who work on these films are all over the place. I think 10 years from now we'll have movies like this probably every year, and they'll be even more crazy and even more ridiculous. You see these 360 cameras they have out now where people can put on their VR goggles and look around. The possibilities for cinema in the future are endless.
Absolutely. Speaking of a fun little trivia bit, Rooster Teeth and the guys who made this movie, they teamed up for a Don't Talk or Text PSA at the Alamo Drafthouse theater chain.
You can find this on YouTube, and it's really entertaining and scary.
Why is it scary?
I don't remember it very well. I remember that I watched it and was like, "Damn, that's cool," but I don't remember it very well. It's similar along the lines of those of the video of people where they did like a test of the theater where they sent out a signal to everyone in the theater's cell phones at the same time. So like it's playing the preview of somebody first person driving in a car, and then everyone in the theater gets like a text on their cell phone because of this device, and everyone in the theater, because it's still previews, they pull out their cell phone, look at it, and while they look at it, the car crashes, and everyone looks up and they're like, "You died," like Dark Souls style. It's like because of cell phone use and stuff.
I could play it real quick if y'all want.
Let's do it. Here we go. Alamo Drafthouse Cinema. Now an important message from Alamo Drafthouse.
Henry! Come on, mate. I need your help. This big cocksucker won't stop talking and texting on his phone, yeah?
Jimmy,
I
4
asked him
fucking
nice.
months.
Yeah, babe.
4 months I've been waiting to see this. He's ruining the experience for me. I can't see shit.
I know, babe, yeah.
Okay? You gotta do something. You have to say something. I
understand. Sorry.
Jesus Christ, Jimmy.
Henry,
I missed my favorite part
mate,
of the movie.
I got it, okay?
Wonder how they got the actor to play Henry. Oh, shout out to Barbara Dunkelman, was the blonde.
Fuck you. I text. Whoa.
Hey! Fuck you doing? Some fucking respect, man.
Oh,
Yeah? No talking and texting on a fucking phone, yeah?
Don't talk, don't text, or Henry and Jimmy will smash your face.
into our delicious oven-baked cookies, which you can purchase at the convenience bar.
They're actually really good. A little bit of extra background is they were showing, Rooster Teeth was showing their film Laser Team on the screen, and also the guy playing the Russian was in Laser Team.
Oh, cool.
So it's just a fun little crossover between those two companies.
The blonde was Barbara, wasn't it?
That was Barbara.
It
And
was Barbara.
A lot
Okay,
of,
yeah.
A lot of the Rooster Teeth crew was the folks in the theater too.
I like it when theaters do fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like it's awesome, especially because it puts you in kind of the seat.
It does indeed. It does indeed. All right. So speaking of how this was actually shot, they used a lot of GoPros. The Hero 3 camera, using a special rig, and we do have a photo of that. So here you go. Check it out. There's one of the actors as Henry with one of the rigs as they're rehearsing, and eventually the GoPro kind of helped. They got behind this movie because obviously, I mean, it's a fantastic PR. Campaign for them, if you will.
That's the scene where he's fighting Slick.
Indeed.
Cool.
And so, by the way, you would think, right, that this entire movie, between all the action, a lot of people would get hurt. No, only 5 stitches and 1 chipped tooth.
I know. To put that in perspective, Hangover 2 had a stuntman become brain dead.
And that was because of all the alcohol poisoning?
No, because it was one of the stuntmen. I think he's better now, but he's still like wheelchair paralyzed. The Zach Galifianakis scene where he's holding his head out of the car, or was it the other actor? Either way, head out of the car, another car came too close, clipped him. So like from the simplest things, people can be irreparably damaged doing stunts, and this movie has so many things that you're like, holy crap, and 1 chipped tooth and stitches, like really?
That's it.
That just shows that the people in charge knew what they were doing. Like
Absolutely.
they knew exactly what to do for each scene, as opposed to like, all right, we're gonna wing it. Hope nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, and again, you had people falling in walls. You had this and that. You had so much parkour.
You got people on fire.
Yeah.
God.
So they did a good job.
I love that the bus. It was like, it's a stupid fucking jacket, mate. Your jacket's fucking stupid. Your disco. The flamethrower. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, get animated, Phil. I get animated.
No, you're welcome to get animated. I thought this quote was interesting from Ilya. Because again, speaking about the complexity of the film, there are no simple films. You could have 2 guys talking in one room, and that's a very complicated film to make, just because films are complicated. But with this, everyone had to relearn their craft a little bit. The stunt guys can't put the camera where they want to hide the punch. You have to work around the issue. Every film is a bunch of problem solving nonstop. With this, we just didn't have as many tools as usual to solve them, which was great. And so on. You can read the full quote, but and Stephen kind of talked about that. When you're forced into that box, to have to be creative.
It's why Star Wars Episode 4, the first one, was great. It's because they had to think. They had to use models. They had to think with the storytelling. They had to use visual storytelling instead of adding 5 minutes to the movie for scenes. Like when you, that's what I don't like. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a bigger fan of like the smaller release and lower budget movies, because I feel like to get them made, you have to do more rewrites and you have to be a lot more clever with the filmmaking. Nowadays, they just throw money at something and say, hey, this is going to be great because we put $300 million into it. Well, if there's no heart, if you don't try to think of how to do things, you're probably just going to go with your first gut instinct and it's going to come out how it comes out. But there might be a better way to do it that looks better if you just had to be in the pressure zone of you can't do it the way you wanted to.
Yeah, I agree to that. And Robert Rodriguez certainly subscribes to that model of filmmaking, where he, as he said, like, you got to refuse to spend.
Yeah.
And let creativity be your solution.
If you can make a movie for $1 million, why do you need to spend $10 million on it? Like, get the $10 million budget, but why do you need to use all of it?
I don't know. Have a big rap party at the end.
I know, right? $3 million rap party.
What I found was interesting too about this movie. So there's 3 cinematographers credited on this: Pasha Kapinos, Fedor Elias, and then I'll let you pronounce the
Vsevolod Kaptur.
There you go. They share credit on this. Now, with the exception of Federer, the other 2 only have about 4 credits in cinematography. So the fact, it's an interesting balance of someone who's quite experienced and then someone, the other 2 who are kind of coming up, but obviously it works really well.
Yeah, and I think egos wouldn't get in the way in that position if Federer is the one directing, kind of leading the team.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've never seen Ultimately, but I think it's interesting. I don't know how they fully divided it, whether it's by scene by scene or they were always present. But, I think together, again, going back to the quote about creativity and problem solving, at a certain point you have to let egos go aside and it's like, okay, how do we just solve this? And whoever comes up with the answer, let's just okay, great. That's a good answer. Let's do it.
Well, Federer has the experience from so many things, but it's always good to have people there who can think of clever different things, because when you're in that position, you have to be outside the box. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, somebody broke our dolly. It's gone. All right, well, we have this chair and some duct tape and we can MacGyver something. All right. I mean, even you with AfterBuzz, we've worked together in AfterBuzz and you've done this so much longer than I have. But in my position, if I have an idea that has to be done one way and we can't, you come up with an idea that we can use instead, and vice versa. How to do everything, but if we can't do it, it's like, okay, well, we can convert this chord to this chord to this chord and make it work.
There's always
you need people on hand to have ideas, just like Mark in the booth.
Indeed. And there's a great article, kind of this cinematography. We talked about it. This isn't the first film to use first-person perspectives. Others have used it, whether it be Goodfellas, so forth. But there's kind of a great article with some great quotes that you guys can kind of check out. But again, all in all, it speaks to the idea that this is sort of the next evolution, in that it can take off from here and really become
a genre,
a device, a technique, if you will, for making movies.
I'm just surprised it looks so good being shot on GoPros.
Yeah, I actually, it's a great campaign for GoPros, as I said.
Seriously, GoPro's doing some big stuff lately. Okay, so are we getting to editing right now?
Sure, we can get into editing.
When the Wilhelm scream came on, I was in my seat yes!
Can you explain to people what the hell that is?
Mark, can you play it real quick? We'll find it online.
I gotta find it, yeah.
All right, so for those, there's just it's basically a sound effect scream that's pretty much used in every movie.
It's an editor's in joke.
Yeah.
It's like how Disney has the numbers put into their movies as a joke. The Wilhelm scream is just that one, just like there's like an explosion scream that's also that's used a lot, but Wilhelm scream is used in yeah,
There you go.
it's used in Star Wars. It's used in everything basically, and you can kind of listen to it. Usually they hide it by other people's screams and just kind of throw it in there on top of the audio. This one, it was super obvious when
Very
he
much so.
throws the grenade down the staircase and the guy just pops up after the explosion with like his arm blown off and everything. It's
Yes. Yes, indeed. And Steve Merkovich, he is the guy who edited this movie. And now, I got to say, this guy's been around. Most recently, he just did Risen, which we covered here on Anatomy. He's done Passion of the Christ. I Know What You Did Last Summer, 16 Blocks, Con Air. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze, and many more in between. So he's, again, in terms of the caliber of people that worked on this movie, this is a good editor.
yeah.
And I gotta give it, like, it shows, right? Because they could have just as easily, well, maybe not. They probably need it for the cuts anyway, to have those breaks in the first-person perspective. But you could see, like, okay, this movie being 2 hours just by kind of letting it play out in the way that it could have. But the fact that they chose to cut it in those ways, I thought was really well done.
Yeah, there's some times where it skips forward a little bit in the cuts, but like it doesn't really affect you that much.
No, not at all. And
Because they didn't need to do this really Birdman style. They didn't need to.
that would have been terrible.
Yeah, it would have been.
That's
really
essentially what I'm saying. So they chose, they had an economy of shots, if you will.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. All right, let's talk about your girl, the lust of your life.
Oh, Daria Charusha.
That's it.
She is so ridiculously good looking, and she is the leather-clad biker chick from the Bikes that has the sword, and it's just all around badass. And she's also apparently the composer of this film.
She grew up with a passion for theater and music, and it's kind of spawned from there. And yeah, again, talk about a whole crew that's just dedicated. Like they're on screen, they're getting the reward, but they're also working hard behind the scenes.
And talk about just somebody who hit the genetic lottery for everything. Talented actress, talented composer, like a 10, like crazy. Yeah, I think she also does like her own music in Russia, like is a well-selling artist in Russia.
Yeah.
I think that's just called Charusha is the name of her music. But I just thought it was cool, like reading your notes and even some of the stuff like the people who you think are just extras or even just parts of the movie or people who like being part of it. Like it even makes me think that the editor wanted to do it as opposed to like, oh, let's find a good editor and have him hired on the movie. Like I feel like it's more of a, hey, we're doing this. Oh, that sounds interesting. Cool. Like,
oh, man, yeah. I agree, and it kind of took off, right? So it premiered at the Toronto Film Festival back in September of 2015 and just became this this massive thing that maybe people expected, but ultimately it led into a bidding war between STX and Lionsgate and Universal over the rights of this film, and became the first sold of the Toronto Film Festival.
Looking at that, those are the three studios. The fact that STX actually acquired it, I was surprised.
Well, I can't speak with 100% certainty, but by the way, any one of those would have been a good choice, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It felt like STX is, of those three, a little bit lesser known, at least in that way. I don't know. Maybe they just felt. I don't know what ultimately the deciding factor was, but I feel like maybe they just felt like they were going to give him a little bit of extra push, a little bit of extra passion, and maybe they wouldn't have been able to like throw marketing money at this in the way that those other two could have. Universal to me out of those is probably the biggest, but that's what this whole through line seems to be, is just passion for the movie.
Yeah. Exactly. If you were looking at this movie as a PG-13 movie instead of what it is, and it's very gory, hard R with tits and ass and blood and gore and murder, I'd say Universal might have been a cool choice just because of like the fact that this could very, very easily become a theme park ride. But aside from that, like I don't see I think the STX, it's great because they're gonna fight harder for it.
No. And Ilyev also said that in terms of marketing this movie, it was never really about just for gamers. They could have had the cliche health bars and this and that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. He wanted to go beyond that and give people a true cinematic experience, not just like if you wanted to play a video game, go play video games.
Yeah, I mean it had it took some of the good things that Crank did. Like the battery in his heart cage, and he had to like replace his battery and get jump started. The adrenaline was a fun touch. But, like, yeah, a health bar really would have made it super cheesy. Or having any kind of HUD display.
No.
Like, oh, let's give him a crosshair in the middle.
Like how many bullets and this and that.
Yeah, no, I'm not in on that.
The only reason to include, like, a reticle or something like that would be to avoid motion sickness, which is what it is for most first-person shooters.
Yeah, but I think the thing is with this movie is if they were going to have a reticle, the reticle would be moving. Because the whole point is that the guy is a cyborg. He's great at shooting. He doesn't need to be looking at what he's shooting. He can just shoot it. He can just be a quick draw.
Yeah, I didn't feel. I only saw it by myself. I saw a very early screening of it, but I can't say that I got disjointed any sort of way. I didn't become sick after any certain point. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah,
and obviously from the premiere over at the Toronto Film Festival, people are on board with that. Like none of them had that. There's no noted whatever sickness because of it.
Yeah, it was very. The cameras were stable, to any respect. Like, a lot of people make the mistake of okay, if you're running, the camera has to go like this because you're running. No, it's the camera's stable. It's running. The arms are what you see, instead of the camera going up and down.
Yeah.
And it gives you the effect that you want without making you feel as a viewer like it's annoying. Yeah.
And that's part of a lot of these, like, whenever people shoot handheld, and more specifically with, whether it be Cloverfield, whether it be all these other movies that are sort of like Blair Witch Project, right? Let's use that.
Yeah,
that's nothing. It's all just shaky. And so, but that's not how the actual eye sees things. It sees things fairly smooth.
Yeah.
Even when you are running. So I agree. As of April 10th, Hardcore Henry has made worldwide 7.2 million, 5.1 million of that being in North America, 2.5 in other territories. So,
I was kind of sad how low it was, but it's not actually low. I'm just so used to these damn huge movies coming out recently. Yeah. But no, because I pegged this number 3 on Box Office Breakdown 2 weeks ago. And it did number 5 in the top 5. But no, I mean, I think more people should see this. And I hope it's going to be one of those things where it's word of mouth, where over the next few weeks, people are still seeing it in theaters. Of course, I wouldn't be able to tell you what the theaters were like because I went noon on a Tuesday to watch this film, which is not peak hours by any means.
Well, it got a 51% on Rotten Tomatoes, so not great, but not definitely not terrible, right? There's a lot worse movies, especially right now. And I think ultimately it will have a broader appeal internationally. The fact that, again, because Henry doesn't ultimately speak, I think it makes it more bilingual, if you will.
Yeah.
So
that's true. It'd be pretty easy to ADR the lines for everything.
You don't even just subtitle it.
Yeah, that's true.
And by the way, the dialogue isn't that heavy in this movie to begin with, so it's not that tons of work. By the way, Russia loves this. Critical acclaim in Russia.
I love the filming locations they chose in Russia. I mean, there's so many abandoned buildings and like gutted buildings and stuff there. So when they go through the city, it's city. When they go through abandoned place in the forest, you're like, oh, this is really believable. I mean, it looked gorgeous.
Yeah, I have to commend them. So all in all, I thought they did a fantastic job with all of this. Definitely worth checking out. And if you guys have a place to buy Hardcore Aiken, let our other viewers know and let me know. I'd love to check it out as well. Just on, I was trying to kind of find it, but
eBay probably. Somebody's probably uploaded it to YouTube somewhere, though.
I'm sure it's somewhere. You know what I mean? It's got to be somewhere. I don't think, especially like that, if for the people that like this movie, I don't think the filmmakers would deny them the right to be able to purchase it or get it somewhere.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts, Stephen Lemieux?
I'd like to see more movies done like this. I'd like to see at least a segment of Edge of Tomorrow 2 to have something first person. I think that would be great.
All right.
I think there's definitely an ability to make a kids movie like this, even if they want to revive Spy Kids or something and do it in this style. I think that'd be...
That's up to Robert Rodriguez, ultimately.
Yeah, but no, I think this movie has finally made it acceptable and kind of something that people would be open to doing more in films, as opposed to before, as it was, oh my God, you're going to give everyone motion sickness. We can't put this in the movie. Oh my God, you're just copying the Blair Witch Project. Like, you know.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, everything's kind of a, you know, sometimes it's a copy of something else. Other times it's an advancement on something. And so I think if someone else were to do something, you know, I wouldn't necessarily call it a copy as long as it wasn't a copy.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys for joining us yet again on Anatomy of Movie here on Popcorn Talk. Steven mentioned Action Movie Anatomy. That's another show we have here. Sometimes there's a crossover on the movies that we do, but as the name implies, typically they do a lot of action movies, typically from the past. By the way, a lot of other shows here as well. Mark Donica, who's engineering us from the booth, he does a show called Jedi Alliance. As you can imagine, that is a show dedicated just for Star Wars. And there's a ton of other ones, so definitely check out our whole slate on popcorntalk.com. And check back in with us, whether you're a returning person. You guys know the drill. We do movies every single week. If this is your first time, we do this similar thing for our various movies, about 2 a week. And within our library, we have over 250 that we've done thus far. In the coming weeks, we'll be doing Civil War, The Jungle Book. In the past, we've done a lot of various movies, so check it out. And you know what? That's the beauty of movies. They're timeless. And so, comment now after you haven't seen it. Maybe then, eventually when it comes out on DVD, you see it again. Let us know what you thought of it then. That's the beauty. It's an ongoing conversation. It's online. It's not one and done. It's forever.
I want to ask you one last question about this movie.
Okay.
What do you think of his decision at the end where she says, "Trust your emotions, Henry," and then he closes the door?
I thought it was great.
Okay.
Because she was a lie. Like it would have felt cheated in some sort of way of like, oh, he forgives her. I understand that she's not Aiken's like the real evil guy, but she made this decision to create this whole lie. And so what? You're gonna let her off? No,
I just didn't know. I was just wondering what you thought of it.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm telling you.
Cool.
I wouldn't have. So if you guys think otherwise, let us know. Maybe I'm just harsh.
No, I just meant like there could have been like a harsher way to.
Then what? Closing the door, chopping off her fingers, and letting her fall from a flying plane to the ground? Mark Donica, please tell me how that could have been worse.
You know what? I think that pretty much covers it.
There you go.
All right, Stephen Lemieux, I fear for what is in your head. And on that note, if you guys actually want to get inside Stephen Lemieux's head, where can people...
Well, you probably don't want to, but you can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Lemieux, StPHEN Tweet at me throughout the week with any comments you have on the Popcorn Talk Network or any suggestions you have that you would like us to start doing. You can also tweet at the Popcorn Talk. And yeah, check out all our other shows.
There you go. And Movie Anatomy for Anatomy of Movies specifically. Thank you guys for joining us. As mentioned, we'll be doing plenty of movies in the coming weeks. Mark Donica may join on a few of them. Stephen Lemieux may join on a few of them. The last one I believe we did was with The Revenant. Obviously a very popular movie, so if you finally caught up on that one, check out our anatomy of it. See you next time.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.